Oh my, it's so empty. It's quiet, there's no one here, all these empty desks. What about the curriculum lab? The copy machine is quiet, it's so quiet. This search for quiet and for silence actually started when I was a child. I'm the oldest of 7 children, and in our house, there was always something going on, and there was no time for personal devotions, communion with God. They were just not part of my life. And then as an early teen, I found myself being sent to a Seventh-day Adventist school out in the country, about 8 miles from the city, and it was a noisy bus going and coming. And the first time in my life, I got a poor grade in school, and it was in Bible, because I had never read it. And so I set up a time after all my brothers and sisters and parents even were asleep, and I would study the Bible under the covers, under the sheet and blanket with my flashlight. And that's how I began to set aside what I kind of call my tent, my time with God. And that's where my personal devotion started. And eventually I became a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I gradually separated from the community of public school and my local community. And in thinking about community, I wanted to share with you something from a book called The Promise of Community, How the People of God Live Together. This is a book that the church I belong to in Maryland, we did this book ourselves. And this is one of the quotes from the book. Different connections motivate us to join communities. Ethnic backgrounds, hobbies, work, geographic locations, friendships, sports, music, interests, and passions. Some of the communities to which we belong occupy us for a long time. With others, the connection wears off very quickly. Some command a great deal of our time and energy, others are almost just incidental. But to varying degrees, we are all immersed in diverse communities. This is a quote from our book from the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Sligo. And there's nothing wrong with belonging to communities. What we're talking about is a different community, a community that I met when I first went to the Adventist Church, and that's the community of faith. And the community of faith, for me, was really important because I felt very alone in my family. They were not Adventist, we did not pray together, and now I'm becoming part of an Adventist school community, an Adventist church community, and who was I? And I know coming to Bogenhofen, I met many communities right here on campus, the youth groups, and many of us set up faith communities right here at Bogenhofen. And what does that mean for us today? Because we're scattered. Some of us a few hours away, some of us a few countries, some of us a continent away. The thought that Jesus was coming soon was really real to me as I became more and more involved with the Adventist Church. And even you, as you left Bogenhofen, I hope you left with the message that Jesus is coming again. That's what we teach here and what we live here. But I can share with you what it means to children. I'm here in the SOA computer curriculum lab, and I'm here thinking about our teachers and their training of children. And I think of my little girl, 4 years old. And we taught her that Jesus was coming again. And one day in West Africa, tropical rainforest, the clouds came out, and this rain was over, and my daughter went out to play. And she came running in the house. "Mommy, come quick, Jesus is coming." And I ran outside, and sure enough, there were the clouds with the shining sun right behind them, and she was just so sure that Jesus was coming again. And it reminded me of when I was 15, and I was at the Adventist school, as I shared with you, and we really believed that Jesus was coming in 1958. We, as a class, gathered all the facts. I still have a little box in my storage in Michigan with all the cards showing that every single sign for for the coming of Christ have been fulfilled. And we were convinced that Jesus would come before we graduated. In fact, our class of 21 believed it so strongly that we put together some fundraisers, got enough money together. We rented the Civic Auditorium in the capital city of California, Sacramento. We rented it for 3 weeks, 3 nights a week, and we spoke and we preached and we told people that Jesus was coming again. We warned the people of California in 1958. Now it's 2020. Think about the fact that it's 2020. The signs have intensified. Where is Jesus? Why hasn't he come? What am I missing in my studies? Is my religion class and Bible study time really helping me to hear God's voice? What does it mean to have a devotional time? What does it mean to have a faith community today? How can I hear his voice? With all the tweets and Facebook things that we listen to, you would think that it's now, that we're in that apocalyptic time. And yet, Satan would have us believe that we're being punished by God in some type of endarkment. But what does God say? What does the Bible, the spirit of prophecy, providential leadings, counsel with others, what does it tell us? This week we are listening to different approaches to preparing for the end of time and the soon return of Jesus. The isolation is providing us time when we are learning about ourselves and maybe even of each other. It is a time when we can study and learn more about God from the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. This is a time when we can read. It's also a time when we can talk with those who are in the house with us, those who are confined and campus bound. Some of the students who wrote in asked to our chaplain, what can family prayer look like? When we think of family devotions, we think of everyone in the house gathering together, singing, praying, maybe reading special texts. If you have children, you might be selecting a song or some special Bible study or story that your children like. Well, I'd like to share with you one evening in Ghana, West Africa. Our family was in the living room. My husband was sitting on the sofa, and the 2 girls, aged 7 and 9, were snuggled up to him. I'm sitting in a chair holding our 1-year-old, and we're reading the book, Margie Asks Why. And I'm enjoying the fact that my girls are asking questions, and they're all engaged in this time. Later, my second daughter, Annette, who was in this family scene with us, she shared with me after we went through many tragedies that she felt that our family had a bubble around us, that whenever a crisis happened, that there was just a time that we came back together again, sort of like my tent in my house, my busy house growing up, that's what devotions provided for her. But all that was to change. We were in Ghana at this time, and we went to bed, we'd had our worship, we were sleeping, and then, "Mommy, wake up, the soldiers have taken over the country." And I woke up, I tried the light switch, forgot we don't have electricity at night, grabbed the flashlight, and the students were gathered outside our window to tell us that the soldiers had taken over. Later that day, we were informed that we had to stay in our homes, foreigners were no longer welcome, and that they had to leave the country. Students shared with us that the soldiers lined the inside of our church, our chapel, and all the students, 500 students, were taken there by the soldiers, and our lives changed. But the memory of that family worship that evening, the children on the sofa with their father reading Margie Asks Why, became a memory that exists still today. There's a reading that I receive once in a while through the internet, and it's from Richard Rohr, and this is what he wrote. "The curtailing of individual freedom to live, to move, to work may be a new experience for some of us, but is familiar to communities who have suffered from oppression for centuries. By necessity, they have developed ways of coping with fear and uncertainty on an individual and communal level. My concern is that we are isolated now, and we have this opportunity to read about these individuals. We can read their stories, people in the past, people in the present, people who've coped with the same fear you might be feeling. They have survived, they have thrived, some as individuals and some as communities. And it will help you if you read some of those books. In fact, Amazon is offering many of these books now for free if you just sign up, because in this time, we need to hear that there are others who've gone through these experiences with us. Another question that came from the students was, why are personal prayers not enough? If we're alone, those prayers are enough. But as it says in Matthew 18, chapter 18, verses 19 and 20, it says, "For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them." And so coming together with more than just our own individual devotions brings us a feeling of Jesus being closer to us. And I can share with you in Matthew 28:20, it also says, Jesus told us, "I am with you always, even unto the end of the world." With families who pray together, there is a shield. There is that tent, that sheet and blanket tent. There is that bubble around us because Jesus has promised to be with us. Even Jesus invited his friends to join him in his prayer time. And when he prayed in Gethsemane, his 3 friends slept. But the knowledge of their presence must have comforted the humanness of Christ. If you read Luke chapter 22, you can read about this time when Jesus needed us, human beings. We are human. A psychologist wrote in a very thick book, all I remember is one thought that I'm going to share with you, and he said each person needs 25 to 40 people who greet them at the shop or anywhere on campus. We also need 15 to 20 people who know our birthdays, who greet us on holidays. But he added one sentence that has stayed with me. We need 4 to 6 people who know so much about us they could put us in jail. Think about that. Do you have prayer partners? Do you have community with people that know so much about you they could put you in jail? Think about that. I know that it's meant a lot to me, even here at Bogenhofen, to have my prayer partner from South Korea, my prayer partner from North Carolina. They make us realize that God is with us. God loves community. The Godhead is made up of community. A student asked, what are God's intentions behind prayer, and particularly group or community prayer? This was a question that came to our chaplain. Well, it has to do with friends, some of whom are forever friends, friends who will give you counsel, friends who will give you encouragement. Now, we served in West Africa, as you've picked up through my presentation, from 1963 to 1979 with 6-year agreements, and every 2 years a tour back to the States. Well, as it turned out, we stayed 4 years without going back to the U.S. This was a time when we did not have a telephone. We had no communication. Packages that came had our names on them, but they were empty. And so we did not have that communication with family and friends, even though they were so far away. This week, Wednesday, I was devastated because Facebook went out on my phone. And I didn't even realize, but when Facebook goes out, so does Messenger. So I lost contact with over 1,000 people who write to me back and forth. And that was devastating. I still have WhatsApp and Kakao Talk, but I wanted communion. I was accustomed to being a part of. So what came to my mind was a book that I read many years ago called The Prisoner in the Third Cell. The prisoner in the second cell was John the Baptist. And John was cut off from his community. And though his disciples could visit, he wanted community. He wanted to know if Jesus was really who he said he was. And if you read Matthew 11, 2-7, you'll read how his disciples went out and found Jesus and observed him long enough to go back and share with John that he was who he said he was. And so I recommend to you to think about us as prisoners in the third cell. We may feel like prisoners during this shutdown, but Jesus is with us. We can be prisoners in that third cell, connecting with our communities and our locale. We can venture out through the media to others with encouragement. We can set certain times to pray. We can set times to pray with people online. And we need to acknowledge, as did John when his world was coming to an end, that we can be gathered even when we are not gathered. Jesus is coming. It may not be in our lifetime, but we need to live each day as if it were today. Luke chapter 3 tells us to prepare the way of the Lord for ourselves and for others. Gathered when we are not gathered, prisoners of the current pandemic, but praying together, prepared to share with others as the Lord brings them into our lives. We need to be watchful. We need to wait. We need to see what the Lord is about to do with us during this pandemic. And as a prayer I read online the other day says, Lord, we're asking that you help us to become a community that vulnerably shares each other's burdens and the weight of glory. Thank you.